Joined now, as we always are, by the loathsome Joel Klatt, whose college football season is almost over after the Big Ten championship game between Ohio State and Northwestern on Saturday in an early start. We will talk about that here momentarily, but let's go ahead and bring in Joel. Does it feel weird for me to say that like you only have one more game remaining on your college football season?
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest with you, it's the worst part of my job is that we don't have any part of the playoff.
Yeah.
So the fact that we don't go on and get to cover the ultimate prize in the sport is something that eats at me. There's no doubt about it. In particular, as a competitive guy, I would love to call a playoff game or a national championship someday, but it's totally out of my hands. And because some of the bowl games, like our bowl game was the Holiday Bowl that we've done in the past, and that one's not playing this year. And so, we're just, we're just done, man, after the Big Ten game, which is, I'll do a lot of different stuff on digital, and I'll do a watch with party for the national championship. So I'll be in and around, and obviously you and I can scream at each other as well. But this will be my last game, which is a bummer.
All right, I want to get into a bunch of different games, but I want to start with this one because I can only imagine what you would have felt like or said in the locker room. If you were Kyle Trask and you were close to potentially being able to win a Heisman Trophy, your team was close to being able to play in a conference championship game with a chance to go to the playoff, and as a part of that, you also then had the shoe incident happen. How insanely angry would you have been, and what do you think the locker room reaction was to all that?
Yeah, I actually thought about that. That's so funny that you asked me that question, because I thought to myself, like, oh my gosh, like, what would I do if I was in his shoes? What would that locker room be like? I thought about that a lot last night, because I've been in locker rooms that got and here's the deal, like, it's not all fun and games. There are fist fights on teams. There are fist fights in locker rooms, right? Like, people, it's not kumbaya, right? And that's okay, by the way. That's perfectly fine. I've seen guys, I mean, I'm not going to name names. I saw a guy hit another guy in the head with a dumbbell.
Oh my God.
A literal 10-pound dumbbell, and knocked him out cold. And I was like, all right, now it's a party. Here we go. All right. It's like, you have to
just in the middle of a workout? In the middle of a workout?
It was a summer workout.
I mean, that could kill a man, not just knock him out cold. I mean, that could kill a man.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. No, I mean, and he was just like ushered into the training room, and the workout and the music never stopped.
Oh.
Like, that's the thing about this. Like, it's very.
What were you doing when the guy got? Were you like sitting there in front of the mirror doing curls? I mean, what was the quarterback workout at the time?
Yeah, I was. The quarterback workout was doing curls. You imbecile! Unbelievable! Unbelievable! No, like, listen. When you're in a workout setting, first of all, the music is really loud. There's lots of shouting going on, and you're in different groups. And so I was over doing like a clean.
I thought this was not a team event. I thought this was just you guys working out, like outside a season or whatever. So this is an official team workout.
Happened. That never happens. You're never just like, hey man, let's go grab a lift. No. Like, that's the thing, is like, if you're lifting in groups as a team always, all year round.
Yep.
And so this is a full-on team event, strength coaches there, and a dude got popped with a 10-pound dumbbell. And again, he was just like, music never even gets turned down. And like the sets never, the bars never stopped clanking around. He just got like ushered out. There was some blood, and everyone kept working out. And then afterwards, you're like, hey man, like, Brick killed a guy. What happened? You know what I mean? It's literally like Anchorman in some of those settings. But and that was just a workout. I've been in locker rooms after games where there was a fist fight. And we played at A&M when I was a junior, and we lost an overtime game in which they had the ball first in overtime. We held them to a field goal. Our offense had played really well that day, and a guy that never fumbles puts the ball on the ground, and they recover, and we lose. And it was just like, oh my God, we never thought we were going to lose. We go into the locker room, and it was, I mean, it was one of the most emotional places that I'd ever been in my life. There was, some guys were crying, some guys were screaming, lots of broken lockers, helmets being thrown. And then one guy stood up and was like, "Hey, stop throwing that, blank and all this stuff." And then boom, they're just duking it out. And it's like, oh, all right, here we go. So let's get back to now the question. What was that locker room like for Florida last night? I have to imagine when a guy makes that egregious of a mistake, and that mistake is not an effort mistake, right? Like if a guy gets beaten coverage, that's one thing. If a guy,
jumps off sides, like you're trying
exactly
as hard as you can to win, and you're trying, and you just make it's like you said, it's an effort error as opposed to a total mental error.
When someone does something like that, I have to imagine that there were serious fireworks. And if I was Kyle Trask, I certainly would have been one of the guys, that was enraged. Not that I ever went after anybody in a locker room, because certainly that's I don't think a leader's job. But man, I get and here's the thing. I hear what Dan Mullen says after the game.
Yeah, I've got a quote. I'm going to read you that quote because that was the next part I was going to say. He said it today, actually. After the game, he said he couldn't really see what happened. He hadn't seen the film yet, whether that was true or not, or he was just trying to, delay the question. But today, he said, he made the tackle. I mean, part of the football move. The kid's shoe was in his hand. He kind of threw it, jumped, and celebrated with his teammates. I don't think there was any intent to taunt. It wasn't like he was throwing it at their sidelines. That's an all-time spin move answer by Dan Mullen there.
The fact, and I don't know him, and this is not a personal knock, okay? So let me give some of those, at least, qualifications. But the fact that he would say that today, what he said last night, and even the comment about after their loss, about, apparently you're rewarded for not playing games. Having that type of mentality as a head coach is in part why your team behaves that way. Loses games like A&M, loses games like LSU, because I believe wholeheartedly, and I have for a long time, that the team takes on the personality of their coach. Yep. It takes on the discipline attributes of their coach, and that is as true as the day is long in football. And to some degree, I think the inconsistency with Florida, while they've been very good, and Dan's an elite coach, right? But I don't know that he has that next gear that we've seen from guys like Nick and Dabo and guys like Urban Meyer that require more out of his team than what we see. And that next step of being elite. And to some degree, that's why I think Florida has fallen short in his 3 years so far. And by the way, he's been great. But again, giving a pass for a player that clearly throws a shoe is in part why he threw the shoe in the first place. And people have to realize that those are tied together.
Is there a way? So when I saw that, my thought was, is there a way to give the pass publicly but privately hold him to account? In other words,
no.
You don't think you can do that? You think those are connected?
They are connected because in this day and age and in this season more than any other, communication is taking place not face-to-face, but via every sort of medium that you can possibly imagine. And you have to understand as a coach that in the past, you could, I think, get away with that when you had, two papers covering you and you said something to the two beat writers and you framed it in a way in which you could tell the team, this is what I said to these two guys. This is what you're going to read in the paper. And then this is what we're going to do as a team and move forward. But it's too fractured now. Everybody's going to have an opinion about what he says. They're going to read it on social media before he has a chance to tell them what he meant and give context to those comments. So in this day and age and in this season where you're not even in front of your team as much as you were in the past, I don't think that you can say something publicly and mean something different privately. I just don't think that that's afforded for Coach Mullen.
Okay, so let's talk college football playoff picture. We're talking to Joel Klatt, Fox's lead college football analyst. It did seem, and I think you would probably agree, that if Florida had pulled the upset over Alabama and if Clemson had beaten Notre Dame, that those would be your four teams quite likely. What has happened now
Probably.
is, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of that depended on, for me, and I know that this, you might roll your eyes, but it would have depended on the margin between Clemson and Notre Dame the second time with Trevor Lawrence. If Clemson would have hammered or is to hammer Notre Dame, I think that their inclusion into the playoff may be called into question, in particular if there was an Ohio State sitting out there, but only then. And now that you don't have Florida on the table, even with a win over Alabama, I think Notre Dame is certainly in. And I think Alabama is certainly in, and I think those two names are in stone.
All right, Alabama right now or the field. Alabama,
Bama.
to me,
Bama.
You would take Bama over everybody else.
You don't even have to. Yeah, you don't even have to give any sort of next question. Bama's clearly better than everybody else. I think they're clearly better than Clemson. They're clearly better than Notre Dame. This back half of the season, I think you can make an argument that they're one of Nick's best teams.
Yeah.
Play. Offensively, they're just a juggernaut. Devontae Smith may win the Heisman Trophy. I'm having a really hard time putting any other name number one on my ballot in a couple of weeks. I can tell you that right now. And from a wide receiver, that's pretty, that's pretty rare stuff. So he's doing things both numbers wise and when you watch him, that it just pops, man. He's phenomenal. Mac Jones has played himself into a first round grade in the NFL draft. Their offensive line is good and physical. Najee Harris can grind it out. And when Mac doesn't play great, like he did last week against Arkansas, it doesn't matter. They can still just pound you with the run game and still score 50 points. They can beat you with special teams. Their defense since the halftime of the Georgia game has been the best defense in the country. It feels like 18 seasons ago that Lane Kiffin was putting up 600 yards on this Bama team. I just don't see any of those teams threatening this version of Alabama, pending injury or some sort of, positive COVID test that hits them in an area where they are thin. I think Bama is the safe and easy bet against the field right now in the playoff.
So when you look at Alabama, one of the things that I think is intriguing now is thinking about what the overall seeding might resemble, right? Alabama probably going to beat Florida. I would be stunned beyond belief based on what I've seen if Alabama were to lose to Florida, right? So I've got Alabama.
Yeah, Florida is good, but they're not great. They're not a great team defensively. A&M beat them. If Georgia has JT Daniels, I think that Georgia probably beats them, and you're starting to wonder, at least I am, what in the world Kirby was doing not playing JT Daniels earlier. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Bama should handle them by 21, 24.
Okay, so if Bama's a 1 seed, do you believe that, let's presume Clemson beats Notre Dame? The College Football Playoff Committee says they don't care about rematches and matchups and everything else. So does Ohio State get slotted as the 4? Or because I just don't think there's any way they're going to put Clemson and Notre Dame playing, 13 days after they just played.
And they won't, and they will take that under consideration. I strongly believe that all of this quote unquote controversy is going to go out the window, and I think Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame. I think it's really tough to beat a team like Clemson twice, in particular when the best player on that team comes back into the fold. And clearly you're going to have even a more robust defense for Clemson with some of those guys back like Skalski. So from my standpoint, I think we are headed directly for a Clemson-Ohio State rematch in the semifinal and Alabama-Notre Dame, which for Notre Dame, this is why I'd been thinking earlier in the week. Let me go on a quick tangent. For the ACC and Notre Dame, it's like, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it's like they would benefit greatly from not playing this game. They're already in.
Yeah.
They're already in. The only thing that can happen for Notre Dame is bad things. One,
that's right.
You get beat by so many points that you start to question, like, well, should we put A&M in? Should we put Cincinnati in? So their spot could come into question, pending how they play. And if they lose, because of this rematch scenario, they're going to get slotted to 4 and have to play Alabama. And that's just going to be a quick one and done. So, if I'm the ACC, to be quite honest, I'm looking at this saying to myself, the only way that we're not going to get 2 teams in is if Notre Dame somehow were to beat Clemson the second time. Only bad things can happen for the ACC, at least in my estimation, by playing this game. This is one of those weird cases where it's like, maybe they should just walk out, shake hands, and be like, we'll see you in the playoffs.
And that's not even considering the injury factor, right? Because if something happened to Trevor Lawrence or something happened to Ian Book, then regardless of what the score is, you really have to take into account how much different. Now, at least Clemson, we've seen what you can do with DJ, right? He came in and he obviously threw and has made a lot of plays for Clemson. But for Notre Dame, the drop-off would probably be pretty substantial. All right, so let's say that we do get Clemson losing again. Is A&M the 4th team in your mind, assuming that Ohio State beats Northwestern and also that we get Alabama beating Florida?
Yeah, I think that's probably
assuming that A&M would beat Tennessee in that scenario.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's. I know, Pruitt's your guy and all, but hey, did Rutgers win last week?
I don't know. I haven't checked.
Oh, I'm sure you haven't. They did.
I missed it.
Yeah, interesting. That guy is 500 at Rutgers in his career. 500 at Rutgers. They couldn't sniff 200 with anybody. Well, you know what? I digress. Let's just move on. A&M probably is going to be your 4 seed in that scenario. If you get a Clemson loss, if you get an Alabama win, I think A&M would go. Because remember now, and people fail to realize this, Cincinnati hasn't even played a game since the committee started.
It's crazy.
Since they started meeting together to rank teams. So, I just don't think the committee is going to sit there and be like, well, we saw that game in October and we're very impressed with Cincinnati. And if Cincinnati doesn't go out there and just blow the doors off of Tulsa, then I don't see the committee valuing Cincinnati, the schedule that they've played, over an A&M team that could claim, if they were to beat, let's be honest, they probably will beat Tennessee. They're going to sit there and say, hey, we won 9 games in the SEC. Any other year, you win 9 games, you won every game that you could
They'll
win
Remember? 8 because the one game they don't get to play is Ole Miss. But
that's right.
Be 8-1.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's right. I'm sorry. 8 games in the SEC were 8-1. I think that would carry the day and be more impressive than Cincinnati. And these people saying USC and Iowa State or Oklahoma, I think that's all pipe dream. USC might be undefeated. They should, in all likelihood, have 3 losses. ASU had them dead to rights. Arizona had them dead to rights. And UCLA had them dead to rights. So this notion that USC is all of a sudden going to garner some sort of playoff attention, I think is fairly laughable on the West Coast. And I just don't think a 2-loss Big 12 team would garner any sort of attention over an 8-1 Texas A&M team in the SEC.